Thanks, Amy. I'm glad to know that Haz knows the title of one of my books. It's pretty clear that he has no idea what I say in there or anything else that I've ever written or said, since the arguments that he's attributed to me that you can push Biden to the left, something about fascism, are pretty hilariously far from the actual positions that I've taken on those issues. Could just go to jacobin.com /author /Ben Burgis and find out what I've actually said about all of those subjects pretty quickly. Okay, but I want to move on from that to get right to the point about why I think trying to attach any sort of pro-working class or anti-imperial politics to the MAGA label is not just a provocation, but actually incoherent. First, on foreign policy, Trump was actually a way bigger militarist than Obama, and in some ways a bigger militarist than Biden. And to put this in perspective, when I say that, I spent the Obama years constantly arguing with liberals about drones and detention and Obama's failure to end the war in Afghanistan. And I've spent the last year being accused of being a Putin apologist because I want peace negotiations in Ukraine. But if you objectively look at all the things that changed in foreign policy from Obama to Trump, in almost every way, as bad as Obama was, Trump was even worse and more aggressive. Trump tore up the Iran deal and assassinated Soleimani, bringing the United States and Iran closer to the brink of war than we've been since the hostage crisis at the end of the Carter administration. U.S. policy has always been to help Israel and screw over the Palestinian people. But Trump was at least one way, literally the worst U.S. president ever on that subject. He did what no president had been willing to do since Israel's illegal annexation of Palestinian territory in East Jerusalem in 1967, after the 1967 war, and moved the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem, thus officially signing off on that annexation and taking that issue off the table for any future U.S.-sponsored peace talks, which was, of course, very high on the neocon wish list. Here's another thing Trump did. He doubled the rate of drone strikes in Yemen. He lifted all of Obama's policies that in any way put any kind of restrictions or oversights on the use of drones, basically just letting the generals do what they want. And again, what Obama did was bad enough. As far as I'm concerned, Obama is a war criminal who should stand trial at The Hague, but Trump was a worse war criminal. We don't even know how many innocent people were killed by Trump's considerably expanded version of the drone war because he got rid of the reporting requirements. Moving from the Middle East to Latin America, Trump reversed Obama's opening to Cuba and tightened up the embargo on that country. Outside of Cuba, the two presidents were about equally bad in Latin America. Obama backed the coup in Honduras, Trump backed the coup in Bolivia. Bernie Sanders, by the way, who was mentioned earlier, spoke out against both of those. If you want an example of a politician who might be imperfect in various ways and not as anti-interventionist as I'd like, but who's about 10,000 times better on any of those issues about foreign policy than Trump or any of the MAGA people in Congress. On Afghanistan, Trump pledged to theoretically get out if he made it to a second term. We'll never know if he would have kept that promise. Biden was the one who actually ripped off the Band-Aid while every single MAGA Republican criticized him for quote unquote surrendering and dishonoring America by letting the Taliban take over as American troops were leaving. Oh, and before we finish foreign policy, Trump was far more of an anti-Russia hawk than Obama had been. Trump has acted like a peacenik about Russia now that he's out of office. That's the easy way to court voters for 2024. But when he was in office, he was super aggressive about opposing the Nord Stream pipeline. Hell, he bombed Damascus while there were Russian soldiers stationed in the city. And let's talk about Ukraine. As hard as it is to remember, back in 2014, Republicans would constantly criticize Obama for being too soft on Putin. One of the things they were always slamming him for was not being willing to send heavy weaponry to Ukraine for their war against Russian-backed separatists in the Donbass. Well, by the end of his first year, Trump did exactly that. And moving from Russia to China, Trump was obviously a huge anti-China hawk. There's a constant feature of his rhetoric. And right now, just this last week, all the biggest MAGA Republicans in Congress have been lining up to declaim about how China is an existential threat and how the United States needs to send more money to Taiwan, needs to cut economic links, and so on. Even the MAGA people who want less aid to Ukraine all say, if you look at their reasons for voting that way, that their reason is that they think China is a bigger threat than Russia. We should focus on China. Moving to domestic policy, Trump was a way bigger union buster than either Obama or Biden. And I hate Obama and Biden. I think those are just mediocre pro-corporate Democrats, and Biden's move to stop the rail strike was despicable. And it showed that even if Democrats are the softer of the two parties of capital, they're still very much a party of capital. But the fact is that Trump was, by any possible standards, worse. He filled the National Labor Relations Board with hardcore union busters who made it way harder for ordinary working class people, whether those blue collar workers Haz is talking about or white collar workers, who, by the way, are also very much part of the, what kind of collar you wear is not the question. The question is, do you own the means of production? Are you forced to sell your labor to a capitalist to make a living, whether you're slinging coffee at Starbucks or working in a coal mine? But any case, any kind of working class people who want higher wages or more of a say at their workplace, if they wanted to organize a union, that was made far harder by the Trump administration. Meanwhile, his big domestic policy accomplishment was a tax cut for rich people. And the Trump administration worked constantly to weaken workplace safety regulations that protect workers from being injured or killed on the job. When you talk about so-called MAGA communism, what you're doing is you're attaching allegedly communist politics to the flag of tax cuts, of deregulation, of union busting, of assassinating Soleimani and moving the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem to fuck over the Palestinians. You're attaching it to the flag of escalating tensions with Russia and China, even as you lick the boots of Wall Street and corporate America. You're using the word communism, but you're attaching it to the flag of the worst, most hardcore enemies of the working class. And again, mainstream Democrats like Obama and Biden are absolutely enemies of the working class. But Trump and the MAGA people in Congress are worse. Last year, all of the biggest MAGA Republicans in Congress, your Marjorie Taylor Greenes, people like that, Matt Gaetz, voted against a proposal to even cap the price of insulin for diabetics. Because even capping it, not making it free, just capping it, is too much of a violation for them of the sacred right of capitalists to make as much money as possible. Now, if you want to say lots of working class people voted for Trump and we should try to appeal to them, I absolutely 100% agree with you. Now, I don't know what this analysis is that supposedly proves that the majority, even of blue collar workers, voted for Trump. I haven't seen that. I'd be interested to hear about it. But certainly, if you just look at exit polls that ask about income, which, yes, is an imperfect proxy for relationship to the means of production, but it does give you a rough idea. The majority of people who have made less than $50,000 a year voted for Biden. Majority of people who made more than $100,000 a year voted for Trump. And there is, what Haz is talking about in terms of class de-alignment, the sort of like weakening of those traditional correlations is true, but it's still true despite that the majority of the working class voted for Biden. Honestly, Trump's most hardcore base of support was from small business owners who hate unions and love tax cuts. But sure, that still leaves probably tens of millions of working class people who voted for Trump. And even if most working class people voted for Biden, I absolutely don't think we should give up on winning lots of working class Trump voters over to the left with better material politics in the future. I don't personally use the C word, communism, in 2023 because I'm not a LARPer. I don't get off on triggering people by using words they associate with the failures of the Soviet Union rather than with the kind of socialism we could build in the 21st century. But I absolutely am a socialist. The long-term goal of my politics is collective ownership and workers' control of the means of production. I'm also a Marxist in the sense that I agree with Marx's theory of history, with his core insights about base and superstructure and how modes of production rise and fall throughout history. And I do think that theoretical framework can tell us important things about how to win socialism in the 21st century. I expect we'll get into all that in the Q&A. I certainly hope so. But I wanted to say at least that much to give people a sense of where I stand ideologically. And even sticking to the politics of the here and now, not those long-term goals, I do think we need a class war, not a culture war. I'm not talking about throwing anybody under the bus in terms of social policy. I actually think most polling evidence shows that the majority of working class Americans are actually fairly socially progressive in their views on gay and trans people, abortion rights, etc. But I do want to strategically focus on economics and cut out the censorious nonsense, the identity politics. And I do think a left that does that could absolutely win over some percentage of the working class voters who voted for Trump. So last point, right? We need to be able to do that, certainly win over some of those voters if we're going to even get the kind of political realignment that would get us Medicare for all of this country, never mind workers' control of the means of production. But I don't think you get there by lying to people about the fundamental distinction We don't win their trust by insulting their intelligence and hoping they can't tell the difference between working class socialist politics on the one hand and pro-corporate, union-busted, Pentagon-serving MAGA politics on the other. What we need to do instead is to tell them the truth about both Biden and Trump, about both mainstream centrist Democrats and tax-cutting, union-busting MAGA Republicans, and we need to offer them something better. You have been watching free public content from Give Them an Argument. To access every single episode of the show, the main show on Monday nights, all of the streams, all of the debate breakdowns, all of the patron-exclusive postgames on Monday nights, all of the patron-exclusive bonus episodes every week, and much, much more, go to patreon.com/Ben Burgis. I cannot resist ending this with, don't be foolish.